It's your boy, Vernard Hines. Good evening, everyone. I am your host, Vernard Hines, aka the Laugh Therapist. And listen, welcome to the podcast, Processing Traumatic Situations Differently, better known as PTSD for some of you people out there. I call it Processing Traumatic Situations Differently. Listen, y'all. Here we try to inform, enlighten, and become advocates for one another as we learn productive ways to process our trauma. Welcome to the stigma-free zone, y'all. Listen, tonight, oh my goodness, y'all, tonight I have an awesome guest, Miss Andolyn Medina. Miss Andolyn Medina. Boy, we done practiced this and I still said it wrong, y'all. Y'all forgive me. I went to Norfolk Public School System. Listen, Miss Andolyn Medina, she has been interviewed and appeared on Good Morning America, the Wendy Williams Show, various televisions and radio stations, newspaper articles and magazines, y'all. Y'all, she has a plethora of stuff that we're going to talk about. So right now, y'all, put your hands together and as you welcome Miss Andolyn Medina. How you doing, Miss
Hi,
Andolyn?
I'm doing good, and you're totally fine. My parents used to call me Andolina Medina all the time. I think that just shows in my name. It flows better, honestly. So,
It does. It does. Andolyn Medina. It does. I want to say, first of all, thank you for being here tonight. Thank you. I met this young lady at a function that we did. I did comedy and she sung the national anthem. And I'm telling you, y'all, it pays to know who you sitting at the table with. That's all I'm saying. It pays to know. I really didn't know who I was sitting at the table with. And I had the book right in front of me with all your information in it. But thank you. You have been on a radio show, the Jamal Based Morning Show. You have done a whole lot of stuff. Just tell us a little bit about who you are, ma'am.
sure. So I'm 26 years old. I'm originally from the 757 area. I've been here since I was 3 years old, went to Hickory High School, and then I left when I was around 17 to go to college at Hollins University. And then from there, I moved up to DC, where I went to George Washington University to obtain my master's in forensic psychology, my master's in clinical psychology, and then next year I will graduate with my doctorate in clinical psychology. So
All
this year,
right now.
I know, super exciting. This year I am on internship with the United States Navy. So I am active duty and I'm a lieutenant in the Navy. And in addition to that, I was Miss District of Columbia 2021 and I placed within the
Okay.
top 10 at the 100th Miss America. And my platform while Miss DC was surrounding human trafficking. So
Oh,
I feel like
man.
that's the nuts and
Listen,
bolts.
I'm gonna tell y'all, I know some people. I keep telling y'all, I know some people. Stick with me, y'all. I'm gonna take you places. I know some people. So let's start off with this right here. Now, you're a naval officer, correct?
Yes, that's correct.
Now, I'm retired Army. That you couldn't have went nowhere near the Army. We need good people. But why did
Well,
you
look,
choose the Navy?
you know how it is. So my parents are both retired naval officers as well, and they were
Okay.
Mustangs. And so, when your parents are Navy,
Right.
you can't, yeah. So
Right. Yeah.
through them, that's why I'm a naval officer, and just more so, seeing the way that they served and what they experienced not only inspired me to be a naval officer, but also, I know we talked a little bit about it, but inspired me to go the psychology route as well.
Okay. Okay, that's good. That's good. And you are very outspoken about helping veterans with mental health, which I am also. But see,
Mhm.
my tagline is I'm not licensed, I'm just medicated. See you
Hey.
so you about so you about to be that's why we talk to the experts here. So what are you looking forward to do once you become that doctor as far as with the mental health with veterans and stuff like that?
Yeah, so I'm really passionate about trauma, specifically through my parents. My dad also has a PTSD diagnosis. And so, through being their child, I think you have such a unique view of like seeing
Hmm.
how trauma impacts your parents, not just like their day to day lot like work lives, but also just the things that they do and the way that they just experience life. And so it was something that I was just always intrigued about as a child. I'm also an only kid, so I
Ooh,
think
hold
being an
up,
only
hold up.
kid,
You're only child. My wife, only child. Y'all some special people.
we're
When you
different. Yeah. Or some rare breeds.
Yes.
Um, yeah, so I think just being an only kid, it's a blessing, but it also makes you a lot more insightful to your
Okay.
parents and the little things that they do in ways that they may not even notice. And then in addition to that, I was an only kid to two naval officers, which means that for me, I think I had an experience of um, what trauma, what death looks like from an early age. So, like, an example is I remember vividly watching The Lion King
Hmm.
in first or second grade. And for many people that watch The Lion King, it's when Mufasa dies, that's like the moment everybody is like not okay.
Right.
But for me, when I watched it, my dad was deployed at the time. And, growing up in this area, it's a huge military town.
Correct.
One of my best friends actually told me that when Mufasa died, she said, "That's what's gonna happen to your father." So, The
Ooh.
Lion King, for me, every time I watch The Lion King, that scene hits a little bit harder
Correct.
because I attach it to the trauma of losing my father. Or, there's
Wow.
I have a letter that I wrote President Bush one day asking him if he would send my father home for my spelling bee because I didn't understand how deployment
Wow.
works.
Yeah.
I was
Right.
like
Correct.
I was like, President Bush, if you go on the battlefield, here's a photo of me. I look just like my dad. Can you send him home? And it's
Correct.
cute, it's cute now to laugh at, but it just is like, what kind of pain were kids
Right.
going through at that time that you're just like begging for your parents to come home?
Hmm.
It's very different from the way that a lot of other kids have to grow up.
Wow. And with my kids, my son was in high school, and my youngest kids were 3 and 1 years old when I deployed. So it affected them totally different. And so coming back and not looking at the news, because I went back in 2003 when it was really they showed everything on the news, everything was blown.
Right.
So when my son graduated from college, he in his speech was, "You don't know how it is to be a child and your parents is in war and you don't know if they're coming back."
Right.
Yeah.
Exactly.
So
Yeah. Yeah.
we don't never look at the trauma that the child goes through by being home waiting for that parent.
Right. And so that's what I'm hoping to do is not only work with military service members and veterans, but I think just through the nature of being a military kid, I have a
Hmm.
really special soft spot for military kids. So I'm hoping to be able to do some of that work too, and also just to build some of the support in that area because I feel like it's an unseen community. And
Hmm.
if you're going to help active duty and veterans, a huge part of that is making sure that their families are okay too. And one of the things that I always, talked about, and I'm sure you agree, is that we talk a lot about the physical toll it takes to serve in the United States military.
Correct.
We don't often talk about the mental toll. That's a unseen,
Un-
unheard,
Come
like,
on now.
yeah, we don't touch it. And it's perhaps the most important
Yes, it
toll
is.
to
Yes,
be
it is.
able to touch into if we're going to protect, our service members and also make sure that they're okay when they come back too.
Correct. And that's what, and see the stigma that surrounds that, because being in the military, it was always get up and let's go. Whether
Yeah,
you're hurting, so now when you come back and someone wants you to go and seek help, you're like, I don't need help.
right.
What I need, I mean, I don't went to Iraq twice. I don't. That's my biggest thing in my family when they say something to me. What? I don't went to Iraq twice. I didn't. So we get so caught up in that to where we're blinded by the fact that we are destroying things around us.
Yeah,
When my
exactly.
daughter was 12 years old and she said that she was scared of her father, that really hit me. I need to go get some help. I don't want my child scared to come and talk to me.
Right.
Yeah, so it takes something really strong in your life for you to say, okay, I need some help.
Yeah.
So what are some of the things you would like to do to try to kill the stigma around it?
I think the biggest one is just being an advocate and
Okay.
talking openly and actively about it. So that's one of the things that I try to do through my social media pages is just trying to be a voice and using myself to be able
Hmm.
to learn that. So I think it's really easy to say like go to therapy, but unless you've been to therapy and you can talk about what that looks like, you kind of just
Correct.
can't tell people what to do. So I like to
Correct.
talk about it and normalize that, it is a difficult process. Talking about your mental
Hmm.
health isn't always going to be easy and isn't always going to be great. Also through just being, in the career itself, I hope that I'm able to be a voice and advocate on behalf of my patients, especially as a Black woman. I believe there's only about 2% of all psychologists or therapists that are within the Black community.
Say that
So
again. Please say that again.
there's about 2% of Black clinicians that exist within psychology. And so, when you're thinking about mental health as a whole, one of the things that we know is really important is for there to be representation, and
Hmm.
for specifically within our community to feel like they can see a therapist that looks like them, that will understand, them, and
Yes.
understand culture and understand all those things. So just being knowledgeable about, what are we up against, and the fact that there
Correct.
are these disparities. I'm hoping to help to fill that gap in the ways that I can. And then also, I would love at some point to be able to impact policy and to make policy changes too. So that's like
Yeah.
much further in the future once I'm
Correct.
hoping
Correct.
more established. But I do think that the legal side of things is really important if we're going to see some change, and in order to make mental health more accessible to all. So those are a lot of some of the things I have going on in my head.
Okay. Well, with the 2% that you said, do you think that hampers uh people of color from going to seek help because they feel like the therapist might not understand them or something like that?
No, for sure. It is, that was my doctoral research was on anti-Blackness as a psychic
Okay.
structure. And I talked about how, not only have we seen racism in society, but when we see systemic racism in society, it plays a role in how we are taught about everything. That
Hmm.
includes how we are taught about psychology, how we think about mental illness, how we think about disorders, how we diagnose. And psychology as a field has done harm to marginalized communities, to people of color, to specifically the Black community.
Hmm.
And so, I think the onus is on psychologists. A lot of times
Okay.
you'll hear the community say, like, oh, well, this community doesn't want to see psychologists. Well, that's because you've done some harm to them in the past. So I think you have to
Okay.
own and meet them where they are, to say, we acknowledge that there are things that we have done wrong in this
Hmm.
community. Here's how we're trying to bridge the gap. And I think by ensuring that there are more people of color, more Black therapists, um, you will see that those gaps sort of heal themselves, because the community does want to seek help. They do want to
Correct.
do this healing, but there's not nearly enough clinicians there to be able to help them through that process.
Wow. That is powerful, y'all. We are talking right now to Miss Andolyn Medina. She is a whole lot. I'm gonna show her website. She's a whole lot, y'all. She does a lot, but right now we are talking about some things that she's passionate about, and we're dealing with the mental health, y'all. And as I call it, y'all, processing traumatic situations differently, because some people process it right, and some people, well, I don't know about right, but some people do it legally, and some people do it illegally. I'm just saying, I've been a part of both of them. So, but I really think that one of the most important things that we can combat the stigma is being open, first of all, to our family members
Yeah.
and letting them know. That's what I did. I was real open with my family members and said, hey, when I left and I moved back home to Norfolk, I'm not the same guy that left.
Right.
So you can't treat me as such. You have to understand me. These are my triggers. This what bothers me, XYZ. And once people who love you really take an interest in what's going on with you, I think that'll help break the stigma a lot too, because people know when you bring me to a barbecue, we're gonna have a good time. But if there's some fireworks that's popping off,
Yeah.
you never know what might happen.
Yeah, and I think I'm also really passionate about transgenerational trauma. So it's the
Okay.
passing down of trauma across
Yes.
generations. And you see that a lot within the Black community, just in
Hmm.
knowing what we have survived as a community. But it
Yes.
also engages with the way that we talk about things. So I try
Mhm.
to talk to my family a lot, because I am one of the few. I think I may be the only mental health provider in my family.
Okay.
I'm not sure. One of
Okay.
them will tell me otherwise if I'm wrong. Um, but through being that, I think like I'm naturally more sensitive or more caring, or I hear the way that we say certain things, and I'm like, okay, you might not hear how somebody may internalize
Mm,
that or engage
right.
with that information. So like I try to build that awareness and education, and for us to just be more sensitive and be more supporting of each other, to create a space where, like you said, you can, if you're struggling, go and tell your family, hey, these are my triggers. Like this is 1 + 1 will equal 2 if these things are to happen. But in
Correct.
order to do that, you need a family that's going to be supportive and that you're going to trust will, listen to you and be able to help you in those moments. So that's one of the things I try to encourage my family to do. And whenever I'm on a platform like this, I just also try to encourage people to be thoughtful about, maybe
Mhm.
how they say things or think about things, because you really never know what people are struggling with. And a
That's
specific way
right.
this comes up is whenever celebrities do something, right?
Mhm.
People always want to post their opinions about what they think the
Oh
celebrity
my
is doing.
goodness.
And one of the things I like to remind my family members is like that celebrity is not ever going to read the things that you say. They're never going to
Correct.
know. The people that will know and see it are the kids in your family
Oh
or the
my
people that are
gosh.
coming up. They're the ones that are going to read what you're saying about
That's
and what
deep.
your opinion is. And you won't even know that said kid is struggling because they're not going to tell you because they just saw your opinion of what you said of a celebrity.
Ooh,
So
that is
it
good.
really do matter.
Wow, that is good because I have a powerful therapist and she say words matter
Hmm.
and the way you word stuff. Like the VA calls my wife my caregiver.
Right.
Okay. My therapist told me get that word out of my vocabulary. She's my partner in recovery.
I like that.
So
Yeah.
when you say partner in recovery, that makes both of us have to do something.
Right.
I could say you're my caregiver and I don't have to do nothing because you're supposed to be taking care of me. But as
Right.
my partner, that means I have to take my meds. I got to go to my appointments. I got to be active in my appointments. And so right. And we don't, me as a comedian, laughing and joking, I can take somebody saying, "Boy, you crazy. Well, you got that PTSD." I can take that because I have
Mhm.
owned it. Somebody else might not be able to can take that.
It's true. Yeah,
So yeah,
exactly.
because I'm gonna tell you one of the biggest things I fought about having PTSD is I had an uncle who went to Vietnam, and when he
Mhm.
came back, he was like shell shocked, as they said back then, but he had PTSD, so he was the crazy one in the family. You know what I'm
Wow.
saying? Go sit down. Go you talking. I did not want to be labeled like that.
Right.
So I fought it. So you are right. You are correct. Words really matter. And you hit on a powerful thing. Kids see more than we think they see.
Mhm. They
Kids see
see
more than we
everything.
think they see. Wow. Now, I know a lot of adult trauma sometimes
Yes.
come from childhood trauma. And I want to speak about, I don't know if this was a trauma for you, but I know it was a trauma for me because I grew up stuttering. And you
Yeah,
said you had a speech impediment.
I did.
And go ahead.
No, yeah. So not only did I have a speech impediment, my speech impediment was struggling to say R's. So I was the slowest reader originally when I started out in school and was picked on because I was behind by the other students. And then I worked like overtime doing the phonics game, doing whatever I could do to become a better reader. And then I
Hmm.
became the top reader, but my issue was always saying R's. So like instead of saying world, I would say world, or instead of saying America, I would say America. And sometimes
Mm,
it happens even now if like I'm talking really
correct.
fast
Yeah.
and I don't notice it, it's gonna
Right.
slip.
Right.
But when I was a kid, I had to go to special education classes to be able to rectify the issue. And so that meant I was leaving class every day. And of course, kids notice everything. So they
Hmm.
noticed that. And I would try to lie and say, like, I was going to the bathroom. But then, it's like, why are you in the bathroom for 30 minutes? So that became
Hmm.
another layer
Right.
of getting joked. And
Right.
so, it was hard for me because I didn't understand, why I wasn't like the other kids, and yet like
Hmm.
why I had some in common with the kids that I went to school with, and why I also had some in common with the kids that were in special education, but then didn't at the same time.
Wow.
And in addition to that, when I was in high school, around 14, I got diagnosed with scoliosis. Which for folks out there, if you don't know, it's a curvature of the spine. And so from that, I had to wear a back brace for 20 hours of the day.
Oh
And
my
I would say
God.
like that was perhaps the biggest trauma because I was in high school. So that's when you're like coming into yourself, you're figuring out your identity, you're
Right.
like figuring out relationships, all that stuff. And I had to wear a back brace. And I remember getting like brutally picked on in school because girls were like, oh, you think you're stuck up, you're walking like super tall, and why do you walk like that, and this, that, and the other. And they didn't know that it's because I was literally strapped in a back brace that
Wow.
I had to, wear in school. And then when I got home, I had to wear it even when I slept. Um, and so that to me was just like I think am like unraveling just how traumatic the
Yeah.
whole time
Yeah.
period was, because you just don't realize how much of your youth it impacted and took away. And recently, I actually was told by the doctors that they have found research in which the back brace never really helped scoliosis. So, I think like that just adds to everything when you're like, wow, so I suffered all these years
Right.
and you're telling me I didn't have to do that.
That
So
sounds like a person that's been in prison, then all of a sudden now he's exonerated and he I
yeah,
could have been
like
out.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah, that's
exactly.
stuttering. That's stuttering. It really, and I catch myself now, I'll be stuttering. And it's amazing that us with stuttering and speech impediments, God still use us to sing as you do and do comedy and talk. I mean, it's just amazing what we have overcome. But what will you say to that child that's out there? Because my son, he
Mhm.
stutters. He stutters. He got it from me, and he's
Yeah.
in the Governor School of the Arts, and the boy can sing like no other. Now we
I
can't
remember,
carry
yeah.
no conversation together because it's gonna take us too long to get it out. But but he can. What would you say to that child that's struggling um, with a speech impediment and feel like it's holding them back?
I would say for one, keep working at it, but I don't think it will hold you back. And I think it's hard. I think that this is another place where representation matters. I
Hmm.
think it would have mattered to me if I was that age and I saw that there were other adults or other celebrities that were actively talking about, I had a speech impediment, and now listen
Hmm.
to me. Can you like, what does that look like? But now, not only is it you and I talking and sharing our
Hmm.
stories and validating those experiences, but you even have President Biden, who has been very open about the fact that
That's
he
right.
had a speech impediment. And I remember for me, even though I'm in my 20s, watching him talk about it, I was like, wow, I didn't even know that
Hmm.
was, I thought I was past it. I thought that, I had already conquered my demons. But hearing the president of the United States acknowledge that he had a speech impediment and yet he is the president of the United States
United States.
was a lot of validation for me, because it
Okay.
showed me that, the sky is the limit and that there
Hmm.
really is no limit to what I can do, to what I can accomplish if I continue to work on things. And I think even larger, something that I've realized now, this is not my original quote, so I'm not going to take credit for it, but
Okay.
I saw somewhere that somebody said, if it doesn't matter 5 years from now, don't give it 5 minutes.
I've heard that too. Yep.
And that has been such beautiful reframing for me, because I think in connection to having the speech impediment, I became like a really great internalizer and a really great overthinker, where
Okay.
everything
Yeah.
I couldn't say, I just kept inside. And
Mm.
so now me realizing like this is not going to matter 5 years from now has just
Correct.
been really helpful, and just like allowing me to let it go and helping my anxiety, which I know is like a huge connection to speech impediments, is like the once you start stuttering, or once you start realizing like those R's aren't messing up, you're gonna get nervous, you're gonna get anxious, and then it just keeps on going. So I find that really helps me to calm down.
Wow, that is powerful. That is a powerful. Listen, ladies and gentlemen, we are talking to Miss Andolyn Medina, y'all. She is a lot of things. She's a Navy officer, y'all. She's a former Miss District of Columbia. We're gonna talk about that, y'all. And she is on my podcast, PTSD, Processing Traumatic Situations Differently, y'all. Listen, I know we done had a wealth of information, and we're gonna keep going right to this next one. Now, one of your major platforms that you ran on or that you spoke on when you was going through Miss District of Columbia was the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children.
Hmm.
What is that acronym? Is that what's that called? It NACME?
Nick Vag.
Nick who?
Nick Meg.
Oh, Nick Mag.
Yes.
Okay.
Like nutmeg, but Nick Meg.
Nick Mag. Okay, okay. Look, that is a serious thing.
Yeah.
It is serious. So what made that be your platform?
So my platform overall was demanding an end to child exploitation and human trafficking, and completing my master's in forensic psychology at GW, we had to do an internship, and my internship happened to be at NCMEG, where I was in the family advocacy group, and so my job every day was calling the family members of victims who had
Mm,
either just gone missing. But there were times that I called family members whose child, sorry, not victim, but whose child or sibling had been lost for 10 years, 20 years, you
mm.
name it. There was one person I was talking to where his parents had passed away, but he was still holding on the hope that we would find his sister. And so we talked every week. And through having that job, like I said, grew up in a Navy household. My parents were extremely strict, especially my mom, um, where, she wouldn't let me go to people's houses without
Oh yeah. Mm-hmm.
essentially running a background check on like who are their parents.
Mm-hmm.
And I
Mm-hmm.
remember thinking she was beyond strict, like this is not a major concern. But when I started working that job and I started talking to these family members and hearing what they were going through, it made me terrified because I realized, one, my mom was right, and
Mm-hmm.
two, that this is a problem that's occurring in the United States, and yet not nearly is being done to talk about it, to educate, and to prepare people for what it looks like. And it's a problem that people say is happening every other place except for the United States, but we are in the top three. People
Mm.
don't realize as well that in the 70s, it was easier to find a missing car than it was to find a missing child because there wasn't even a database set up yet for missing children. So
Wow.
we are quite frankly working, you know, decades later than we should have been on this issue, where, it's not only about finding the children and making sure they're okay, but also really, cracking down the hammer on these perpetrators of these crimes. And our laws still haven't even caught up yet to be able to make sure that that crime is nearly as punishable as it needs
Okay.
to be. So that's part of why I started that platform, especially being Miss DC. DC is a huge area where this happens. And so I wanted to, use my voice as a Black woman, and as a title holder to spread the awareness about what's happening and how it's affecting all of us in the United States, but especially communities of color.
Mm, wow. How did that affect you having to make those calls? Was that
Oh,
any residual?
yeah, it was really tough. And in addition to that, so that was my internship. But then after that, I worked on a victim hotline, a 24-hour victim hotline,
Mm,
where I wasn't just working in the office, I was also working at home. And there'd be times working the overnight shifts where I'd roll over and I'd be like, National Center for Victims of Crime, like, how are you doing?
wow.
So it really took a toll on my mental health. I think that was perhaps one of the most depressed sort of stages of my life I had felt, where like nobody outwardly saw it, but just the day in, day out of just hearing trauma and sad news and like this, this way like which you're helping and you're helping, but you're also
Hmm.
like, but I'm not doing nearly enough. Like I
Correct.
can't I can't change what's happening. And one of the things that always lives in my mind is I remember working on the victims of crime hotline. On that hotline, it was completely anonymous. So at least on, working with missing children, I knew who I was talking to. Victims of crime, it
Mm.
was anonymous. And I got a call one day from somebody in Chesapeake, Virginia, who told me that they were being trafficked. And they described the battlefield at the intersection. Like they told me exactly
And
where they
you knew
were.
everything
And
because
I
you were
knew
from the
exactly where they were because I've lived
right.
here.
You from
So
here, correct.
it's chilling to me because I was in DC and yet I was on the phone with somebody who was where I live. And it was like, okay, like this is happening here. This is happening where I live, where I've grown up, the streets I know. And quite frankly, because of, living in this area, quite frankly, it's possible I know this person or I
Hmm.
know somebody who knows this person.
Hmm.
And yet all I can do is provide them with resources, which at the time there were very little resources in this area. And that's all I can do. Like, And that was just one of the saddest moments for me. I had to take a break that day off work because it was just like, how is this hitting so close to home? And yet
Mhm.
there's little to do to protect the people that it could be impacting.
I like that you said you took time away,
Hmm.
and that's what we really have to do. Sometimes us as advocates, we get so ingrained in it and so in it. Even with me, with my peach, doing my advocacy, and I have to sometimes break away and be like, I need to chill. I need to get myself under control
Right.
because trauma, like I said, affects people totally different, totally different. And you did a lot of education. You went to Hollins College for
Yes, sir.
singing and I mean for psychology and singing, and then you went to why you in school so much? No, I just went to high school. And all of you high school, that was it.
I know, it's crazy. I love school. And when I picked the psychology major, my dad was like, you're going to have to be in school forever, right? And at the time, I was like, but it's flown by. And I actually
Okay.
remember when I was in college, I asked my professor, like, how did you know that you wanted to be a professor? And he said, you just like never want school to end. And it's
Mm.
crazy because ever since I've like been on this journey, I'm like, I can't wait till it's over. I can't wait till it's over. And this is the first year of my life where it's like technically over and I'm doing what I've been training all these years to do. And I got to tell you, I miss school.
Wow.
I miss it. I'm not sure I want to go back, but I definitely think
Okay.
I'd like to be a professor. If I went back, it would be for law school. Uh,
Right.
but I think I want to be a professor because I do like educating and I do like talking, and it feels nice to be able to share that with like the next generation that's coming in. My professors have made the biggest difference in my life and the way that I think about things. And to your point of, taking care of yourself, like
Hmm.
that was modeled to me because of my professors,
Okay.
because of them just being really honest and active about being like, Andolyn, are you resting? Andolyn, what are you doing for your self-care? Like making me actually tell them how I'm taking care of myself. Because the way they thought about it was, you can't be of service or of good to anybody else if like you're empty or you have nothing left in your tank. So it's really important to make sure that you're working on yourself and taking that time to heal and do what you need to do.
Yeah, and that's amazing because I had a talk last week with my therapist, and she laid it out to me.
Hmm.
I had some meds that I really wasn't taking because I didn't like that one for what reason. I just think I didn't need it. Yes, I needed it. I wasn't getting my sleep. So it's a lot of other things that can affect us that we don't know about. That
Right.
we know about but we're not doing.
Yep,
But
exactly.
from your perspective, what would you say to a spouse
Mm,
who is dealing with someone with PTSD and just don't understand it, or just how I get a lot of that.
yeah. Well, I'm not married, so I'll start there.
But
I'll
you're
start
gonna be dealing with veterans
there. Yes,
and
yes.
people. Oh, yeah. Oh, she said you're not married. The boy, the comments went crazy then.
Oh,
The comment went, oh, what? He what? But no, well, but seriously, my wife speaks a lot about it, and we speak a lot about dealing with a spouse with PTSD and just some of the things that we go through as married couples. Not because one thing I'd say is PTSD don't care about life, and
right,
life don't care about PTSD. They are going to happen.
right.
They are going to happen.
Yeah, I think I just in encourage conversations about, what is happening, what are you as the person with PTSD experiencing, what are some of the ways that you notice your triggers, how you're coping, but also I think being able to be receptive to how that's impacting your spouse, and also ways that they might notice that it's impacting you and ways that you don't even see. And I think that that's really important as well, especially when you're a couple and you're a community, and it has to be a team mindset, like
Has
you
to
said,
be.
partner in recovery. It has to be you all approaching the trauma together, not like one person is the person with the problem, so to speak, versus you. It has to be you all as a joint force against this issue that's coming up. And I think when it comes to trauma, it's PTSD, but I also think it's worth noting that there are a lot of different ways that trauma exists within all of us. So
Okay.
it might be one person that has the diagnosis, but there also might be the other person that doesn't have the diagnosis, but does have a trauma history or does have relational trauma or does have their own mess, that it's important to figure out how those things are impacting each other or coming out in the relationship. So ultimately, you wanna be able to come together to be able to support each other, but that only can work if you're having open communication and dialogue, coming together as a team, and helping each other build insight into what you're noticing occurring within one each other and how you can be better. And I do advocate for not only individual therapy, but couples therapy as well. I think couples therapy can be extremely helpful, especially in getting your footing on these issues. It's not one thing that any one person has to shoulder alone. And
Correct.
that's especially the case for couples. It doesn't have to be that you as a couple have to shoulder it alone. You can go seek help in couples therapy,
That's
and
right.
until you feel like you guys can get on the same page and the same foot, do that. But I
And
do advocate for that.
that's positive. And one of the main things me and my wife have done, we have included our kids.
Yes.
Our kids know, they know, because what I didn't want my kids to do is walk around on eggshells and be like, what's wrong with daddy? I'm gonna tell you what's wrong. And my daughter, she goes to Virginia Tech, and she went for psychology to start, but then she was like, I'm not gonna be in school this long. I ain't doing
Yeah.
this much school. So she backed out, and she gonna use that as a minor. But she became, after my wife, one of my biggest advocate about keeping stress away from me.
Mhm.
She did. Once she found out that stress causes a lot of stuff with me and me trying to overdo a lot, she be like, hold up, ain't nobody killing my daddy. He
Yeah.
can't do it. He ain't doing it. So it's like we have to have people who are advocates for us, because I'm the type of person, I still feel like I can do everything.
Mhm.
And I easily get overwhelmed.
Mhm.
Like, this is the one we just had. My family, a lot of people are coming in for Thanksgiving. So I took it upon myself, I'm a plan Thanksgiving, and I'm driving stress out beyond. My wife was like, you are stressed, babe.
Yeah.
So we take on so much that I had to get advocates.
Yes.
And my cousin was one of the advocates. She was like, let me tell you something, cuz you ain't gonna kill yourself. This is what we gonna do. We gonna XYZ. So knowing that you do have a disorder or a mental health that you're dealing with, they know, then they can see things better.
Yes. And I appreciate you saying that too. Even me being in this field and doing my own work and knowing these things inside and out. And
You
I'm
the
not
worst
gonna,
one.
if my mom asked me about it, I didn't say that I said it, but she can be really helpful with just like
Mm-hmm.
in these moments being like, hey Andy, did you sleep?
Mm-hmm.
Did you eat? And then I'm like, no. And she's like, okay, because you're being a little bit irritable. Like maybe,
Mm.
and it's like
Gracious.
you don't think it's like you said earlier, you don't think it's like sleeping or eating, but those are like the main two things that like, okay, before we tackle anything else, like have you done the things that your body needs to be okay?
Come on now.
There are moments where I'm a huge, you know, I will overwhelm myself.
Mm-hmm.
I will say yes to just
Yes.
anything if I can do it. And I've only just now started to be like, no,
Mm-hmm.
no, I'm not
Liberating.
gonna do it. And it's liberating. It's so liberating because
It is.
I was a chronic people pleaser
Please.
for so
Yes.
long. And I'm just now being like, I'm done with it. I'm not
Mm-hmm.
doing it. You can have
Mm-hmm.
it. I don't care what you think of me.
Correct.
And it feels so much better. But it's nice to have, whether it's my mom or my friends that I think know me, in a different capacity and know me like really well, for me to be able to talk to them about it and be like, I feel really guilty about this. And them just being like, girl, say no. Like you do more with 24 hours in a day than people do with like a week. So they're like,
Yes.
say no. Like, okay, be the bad guy if you're going to be the bad guy, but say
That's
no.
right. That's
And so
right.
it feels really liberating where I'm, like on behalf of myself, it's like you got to stick up for yourself. You got to
Mm-hmm.
advocate for yourself because, unless you have those people in your corner that can do it, and it's amazing when you do, you're the only person that ultimately is going to have your own back. And
That's
so
right.
you have to try to gain that insight and get the work to be able to make those calls. Cause yeah, saying no feels amazing these
It
days.
feel amazing. I get to the point where I was at first. I was like, if I say no, how they gonna feel about me?
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? They gonna be upset, or they gonna say I'm acting funny. So Yeah. Listen, y'all, we are talking to Miss Andolyn Medina, y'all. She is a naval officer. She interning to be a clinical psychologist. She's Miss District of Columbia, which we're going to talk about. She's a Ph.D. candidate, correct?
Yes, sir.
And she's a member of Alpha Kappa Alpha sorority.
Indeed.
Okay. I always wanted to be a Kappa growing up.
Okay.
Yeah, but I didn't go to school. But I realized if you stay in the military long enough, they'll give you your own cane. So I consider myself a Kappa. But listen, y'all, we're having a great conversation. But I want to get to this part right here, y'all. If you have been enjoying this information, this plethora of information, at the end, I'm going to give you her website, her information, y'all, because she has a lot more. And this was a question that was not on the paper, but I'm going to ask it anyway.
Okay.
Are you planning on being an author one day?
I haven't given much thought to
Okay.
it, but maybe. I will never say never. There will be
Okay.
things I will say never, so
Yeah,
maybe.
people have asked me that all the time, and I've been dodging that, just like I was dodging this podcast right here. But eventually, I know I'm going to do it. I know I'm going to do it. Now, let's get down to Miss District of Columbia.
Yes.
Miss, yes, 2021. What made you decide to do that?
Well, so my origin story with pageants was similar to what we've been talking about when I was 4 and
Okay.
I had that speech impediment. I was also super shy. I'm also still naturally shy, but I was even worse when I was 4. And my mom sort of heard me just like screaming around the house and thought, "Oh, maybe she wants to sing." And so she put me in pageants because she figured it would be a really great way to get me out of my shell and to start, talking to people, connecting, gaining confidence, building self-esteem. And she and my dad made the agreement that if I ever wanted to quit, I could. And so there were
Okay.
times in my life where I did. And so through competing, however, I won Miss Virginia's Outstanding Teen and was a top 10 at Miss America's Outstanding Teen, which is the baby sister to Miss America. And from doing that, I gained a full tuition scholarship to my undergrad.
Mm.
So that amassed to over $100,000 because
Ooh.
it's not cheap. So at that point, it became a turning point of like, this could actually help me further my education. And my parents always like education was the top thing. So it was like, if you have your education, nobody can take anything away from you. So that
Correct.
was always the goal for me. And after I finished college, it just became the next thing was like, okay, let's gain more scholarship money. And I also continue to build my skills. So, like we were talking about, I originally was super shy and had a speech impediment. Now I have the confidence to be able to speak to anyone about just about anything. Um, I often say that my Miss America interviews are 10 minutes long and they ask you anything under the sun. You have to be ready to answer anything under the sun within a matter of
Wow.
seconds. And I went when I had my naval officer interview that was an hour long. My mom was like, "How did you do that?" And I was like, "Well, because I had years of Miss America interviews under my belt where
Correct.
anything now was quite possibly a cakewalk." So
Wow.
through competing, I think it just was the fact that it was really helping me build these skills that I knew were going to pay off later in life. And then
Okay.
also allowing me to be an advocate. And I competed in Virginia for years, but when I moved to the District of Columbia for grad school, that's what made me pivot to want to be Miss DC. And
Okay.
it is one of the greatest honors of my life. Competing at Miss America, I was competing as the 100th Miss DC, and the very first Miss America was Miss DC. So I got to show how far we had come in 100
Mhm.
years. And I also got the approval to wear my naval uniform in the interview.
Wow. So you mean to tell me, coming from a speech impediment,
Mhm.
coming from wearing a back brace in high school, to
Oh,
being picked on, to being talked about, to being joked on, to you became Miss D District of Columbia. Listen, y'all, she's letting you know right now anything is possible.
and even that, I will tell you, the kids that picked on me came back around when I became Miss DC.
Of course.
So I'm just saying.
Of course. Listen, y'all, we are having a ball with Miss Andolyn Medina, and I'm going to get personal with you right now because my wife saw your picture,
Okay,
and my wife said, "Oh my God, she is beautiful." And I
thank you.
shared with my wife, y'all have a whole lot in common. She has an African American mom, and she has a Puerto Rican father.
Oh, awesome. Yeah. Well,
Yeah, so that's why I know people are looking at you like, what is she mixed with? She got
yeah.
something in it. Yeah. So when I told her, she was like, oh yeah, I see. So yeah, so that is a lot in common. And
Yeah.
you have a dog, you a fur mom?
Yes. Yes. His name is Knowles, so I'm obsessed with Beyonce. So he's named after
Okay.
her.
Okay.
Yes, he's 4 years old and just a joy.
Wow. Wow. So I wanted to give you the final words before I put your information on the screen for people to follow you on social media and stuff like that. Just give us some parting words. I know we're supposed to do an hour, but I'm not going to belabor the time. You are doing an outstanding job. You have gave a plethora of knowledge. I learned that word yesterday, and I was just looking for a chance to use it. So you gave us, so in your parting words, what would you say to the people out here?
Well, I thank you for giving me the space to be able to share and talk to all the folks that are joining us. Um, I just think, as I've sort of stated, you have to continue to make your mental health a top priority. And one of the ways that I do that is, if you think about a glass, if you're constantly pouring out of your glass, you're eventually going to run empty, you're going to run dry. So just continue to make sure that you are pouring into your glass. Make sure that you are making more deposits than you are withdrawals. And just, surround yourself by the people that love you, that care for you. Surround yourself doing the things that you love to do. Live a life that is fulfilled in doing those things. My dad always told me, if you love what you do, you never work a day in your life. And so I try to make sure every day I try to do something that I know is going to bring me joy, or even more than that. We touched on it, but I feel like I spend the majority of my time with my patients
Okay.
healing from when they were kids. So
Yes.
one of the things that I like to do for myself now, even though I'm, still a child, perhaps to some, um, is I try to do things that are gonna make my inner child happy. So, if that's the just looking at the stars or looking at the
Hmm.
sky, like, wow, that's pretty. Just like simple things I try to give myself to enjoy about life, just because I know that life can be really bleak and really difficult. So just, continue to pour into yourself, continue to look out for your inner child. They are in there somewhere looking for somebody to protect them and make them happy. So just continue to make sure that you're doing that work. And I know that you're going to give my socials. So I'm running right now a, question and answer thing on my Instagram. And if folks have any questions for me, about me, or, whatever, we can keep this conversation going. But those are the best ways to stay in touch. So thank you.
All right. This is her information up there right now. That is her web page. That's her website. I'm telling you, when you go to the website, just make sure you got time. Okay. There's a lot of information up there. The young lady has done a lot. She has done a
Well,
lot in her
this
huh?
came up on the radio show. So my Instagram is the all around Sag, and that's because I'm a Sagittarius. So
There you go. Yeah, we ain't
I
know what
warned
that
you
was.
now.
We were saying all around sage. We like, okay, so it's now she waving stuff. We didn't know what she was doing, so we had to find that out. But listen, Miss Andolyn Medina, thank you. Thank you. Thank you. You have given us some great nuggets. And listen, y'all, this, if you need someone to hear this again, please send it to them. And I'm telling you, as she said, go to her Instagram page, the all around
Sag.
Sag, and follow the conversation. Continue with the conversation. Again, thank you. May God bless you, and you have a great evening.
Thank you as well. Good night.